Well. We are live on LinkedIn. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. And it has been a while, nonprofit family, since I've done a live stream. I've been busy. I was feeling a little like churning out content. My heart wasn't 100% into it. So I kind of took a beat that turned out to be several months worth, like most of 2023. But we are back here. We are live with a great conversation that I think will kick this stuff, these live sessions, back back on again, let's say. If you don't know who I am, my name is Maureen. I'm a nonprofit digital strategist and technology coach. And my passion in life is to help nonprofit teams make really good decisions about the technology they use to engage their supporters, raise money, and know whether the things they're doing are working or not. And I could not be more delighted by today's guest. Sarah O'Hare from the Parkinson's Foundation, the AVP of Development Special Projects. And we're going to talk about projects and project champions and how to make things happen without doing the work yourself. So Sarah, it's such a pleasure to have you here. We talk all the time. Would you be kind enough to do an introduction, please?
Yes, well, thanks for having me today, Maureen. I appreciate it. So as Maureen mentioned, I'm the Associate Vice President of Development Operations for the Parkinson's Foundation. The mission of the Parkinson's Foundation is to make life better for people with Parkinson's. And I have been with the Parkinson's Foundation for a little over 12 years now. What's a little interesting is I was originally hired to launch the first peer-to-peer walk in a market where we didn't have, much of a presence, or where the foundation didn't have much of a presence. So I was kind of an experimental role of like, hey, let's put someone in that community and see if we can, build it from the ground up. And I did that locally for about 6 or 7 years, and then had the opportunity to take on a national role, which was really wonderful. It was kind of as we were really growing the field market across the country and wanted to structure ourselves as a chapter network. And in doing so, since I had been in so many roles locally, it was a good hat for me to put on, just because I had been there doing the work and I knew where we had some gaps and where some streamlining could really help, that position. So I did that job for a few years and then was promoted again to take on a couple additional teams. So still working on the development advancement side in the back of the house operations, but I also took over our CRM data team, our fundraising technology teams, as well as donor services. So that's where I live today, and it's been a lot of learning. I got thrusted into sort of the data role in the midst of a data equalization project that I'm sure we'll talk about, but learn a lot kind of as I went along. And I appreciate, Maureen, you being kind of by my side through that and a partner to me, helping me mold into this role, which I very much enjoy.
It's a curvy path, right? That's really what we all walk when we're doing nonprofit work as lifers, which I think we both are. And I think what's great about the story that you shared just briefly about your career path is that all of those boots on the ground, kind of hands on keys, experiences really positioned you, I think, to be a very effective project champion. For folks who are watching who don't know what that term is, it's a member of either executive leadership, senior leadership, someone who probably supervises a bunch of the people who are actually participating in the project work, whether it's data or design or just general technology stuff. And it's a really critical role because the champion has to make sure that the work is getting done without doing the work yourself. And that leads me to my first question, Sarah. So, what have you realized about being a champion in a large organization where I think if I had to guess, we're probably working on 7, 10 different separate tech initiatives, and you're playing the role of the champion for all of them. So what do you think a project champion's role really should be as you're sitting in it? What do you see the benefits?
So I love a good project plan.
Right.
And I think that, that level of organization is what's very much needed. So a good project plan has several key elements to it. One is a list of tasks, a timeline, the budgets, and, the phases of the projects and so forth. But one key element, in my opinion, is the piece of assigning who's doing those tasks. There is nothing worse than, getting to the finish line on the planning of this wonderful initiative that you're excited to roll out. And then you get to the end and you realize there's, maybe no one at the end to do the actual day-to-day management work
Mm-hmm.
of the initiative. So if there's a lot of stakeholders or a lot of different departments that are involved in some of these projects, that's where I think a project plan and a good supplemental plan, if there's a lot of different tasks and so forth, is a RACI matrix. But really getting that adoption, I would say, from all of the different departments that are involved, especially when it comes to the technology piece of my role, making sure that the end users of that technology really have a say in the game up front so that you understand what they're looking for in the technology, how it's going to affect their day-to-day role. Is it going to make more work for them? Is it going to make their jobs easier? Those are all things that need to be taken into consideration. You always want to create an efficiency when you're bringing on a new technology. You never want it to be like, oh gosh, here's another thing I have to learn how to do now. And it's coming from the top down and everybody's telling me I have to do this and I don't have the capacity for it.
Yeah, that in a nutshell kind of describes why having a champion, in my experience anyway, is so critical, because the perspective you're bringing is bigger and more whole life cycle oriented than just like, my job is to do X, Y, and Z. My role is to find all the duplicates. My role is to test a new donation form, like whatever those tasks happen to be. You're thinking about the beginning, the middle, the go live, and then the user adoption. And I think people forget about that piece, that humans in general don't like change. We try to resist it in both overt and kind of covert ways. I'm not going to do that until I really, really have to. And that kind of leads to my next question for you, which is, how do you talked about people being responsible and accountable to get some stuff done through the whole life cycle of these projects. How do you decide what tasks go to what person? Or your team much better than the consultant or the technical partner. How do you decide to play to people's strengths? Like it's
That's a good
somewhat of a
question.
growth opportunity, but what kind of mental planning do you do when you think about who is the owner of these different pieces of a project?
Yeah, I think that related to some things that aren't necessarily technology within my department, but with the as a whole, it's really an adoption with other senior leaders. Like I'm constantly in communication with our chief operations officer, our chief development officer, because some of the people doing the work might not be on my team. So it's really making sure that those, again, end users are at the table to say, this is going to be helpful or this isn't going to work because we don't have the capacity to do it. Or, hey, is there another, maybe supplemental product out there that can do X, Y, and Z because this one doesn't? I think when it comes to projects that responsibilities roll down to my team, it's really, I'm very fortunate that I have some great leadership under me. And so it's really letting them decide, again, who's going to do which specific project. And I think setting deadlines together is important because, someone might not know that the donor services team right now in December is really cranking it out, and they don't have time to take on, any extra projects right now through probably mid to end of even January, just because of the volume. So, working with other leaders and people within those departments just to understand what they have going on and how everything is going to like fit together. You have to be flexible. You have to be flexible when you're in these situations, because you might have, in my head, like, oh, we should be able to get this done in the next 2 weeks. And then
I've heard you say that actually many times.
Right.
Can we get to the end? Can we be done with this? What's taken so long?
Yeah.
So it's really about communication upstream or with your peers, right? Making sure that everybody kind of sees the same picture in their head, and then partnering with the folks who are doing the work and setting attainable deadlines and goals so they feel successful. They feel like things are happening with them, not to them, which helps adoption at the end of the day. If people were just churning through and didn't have time to make really good decisions, the end product is not going to be as great as the dream was at the beginning.
Yes, you need a cohesive group, in the adoption.
That's great. So here's another question that I think many of us struggle with, which is there's always a lot of projects, always a lot of great ideas, always a lot of new functionality or a better supporter experience we want to work on. What do you think about when you decide we're going to do it this year, we're going to put it off, I'm going to reevaluate in 6 months? Help us understand a little bit about that strategic thinking that you bring to the table on behalf of the organization's resources, really.
Yeah, that's a great question. We went through this data equalization project where we fixed a lot of our duplicate records, and the end goal of that was to not only have cleaner data, but also to be able to roll out things like journey mapping and constituent experience and all of those things. So while we were in the midst of that, there wasn't a lot of other, room for other sort of improvements. But now that it has been a little bit of a opportunity to figure out ways to, I always say it has to create an efficiency, or it has to make the experience better for the constituent. And if it's doing both of those things, that's a win. And then, looking at other things. So one thing that we rolled out this year was an opt-out. So we have 3 data systems, if you can believe that, which I'm sure, most nonprofit organizations are in a similar boat. But what we were finding is that we had to, if somebody was manually opting out through an email or a phone call, we had to opt them out in all 3 systems. And that was a lot of manual work. We were getting, enough of them a day to have that take up, enough of someone's time. So we have a great partner that helps us with some of these projects. They were able to come up with a form where people can opt them out just on the one form. And that actually opened it up so that other people getting phone calls could opt people out too, versus only having one, person that's doing that. But that saves us around 20 hours a month. So when you're looking at projects, again, it either has to create an efficiency or it has to make the constituent experience better. And I always prioritize them as far as like, what's feasible with the budget that we have, what's going to make the most impact, and what's going to be the most time saving in the long run for the team.
Yeah, and I'll layer something onto that, which is something that we're starting to see in the projects we're working on together, which is folks bringing some budget together, right? If a new process or a new piece of technology or some swanky thing that's going to help your supporters feel closer to you as an organization, want to support you more. If those initiatives touch multiple departments, not just yours, not just development, but maybe the volunteer team or maybe communications, those folks come together in the initial budgeting and say, I can fund X and Sarah can fund Y. And that
Yes.
usually makes it much easier and quicker to get those things approved, right? Because then senior leadership, executive leadership can see that it's not taking everything out of your budget, but it's a
Yeah.
kind of a shared expense.
Yeah, two things I would add on there is, as we go into budgeting season, it's meeting with those different departments and asking them, like, out of your technology, out of the systems that we're managing, what are your gaps and what would you like to see change?
Mm-hmm.
And that usually also guides where we're, making those priorities. And then, gosh, there was another piece I was going to touch on that was related to that, but
It's gone.
my
It'll be
mind.
back. Let's see. Interrupt me if it pops back into your head. Another question for you is really about how you keep executive leadership, maybe the board, looped in the right way. That's also another huge benefit to having a project champion who
Yes.
can carry things to super exec, like the C levels, the senior VP levels. Do you have tips for folks who maybe are serving in that project champion role, but are not actually members of the leadership team or the executive leadership team? How do you keep them appropriately looped in and kind of sharing successes?
Yes, that reminded me of what I was going to say before. I think that it can be a challenge to get buy-in for some of these projects because they don't always you have to like bring them down to a level again of, oh, this is going to save time, like versus like, oh, we're going to have this system and it's going to opt people out in one form instead of three. Like that doesn't necessarily always mean anything to people that aren't in the data world or even the field. So I think presenting things in a way of showing the investment and the benefits of the investment
Mm.
where I always, try to lead with. And we're a fortunate organization where our senior leadership meetings, we can always bring other team members in to present. So using other team members, or else, sometimes I'll even bring you in, Maureen, just to show like some of the accomplishments that we're making. And when you do that and you get excited about them, and like, the last meeting, Maureen, I think we presented on, I was like, probably needed to tone it down because I was so excited to share all these great projects that we had done. And people are probably like, okay, well, yeah, that's awesome. But again, showing it in a way of like, this is going to be so much better for the constituent. When they go to register for an event now, they're going to see this or they're going to see that. So I think bringing it to the level of what it's going to do externally, or again, that time saving, which I keep coming back to.
It's important, like hiring new staff, bringing on net new people, not happening in most organizations right now. There is quite a bit of belt tightening in calendar 2023 for most orgs because fundraising in 22 was a little weak sauce, right? So you gotta play with what you have. And that leads me to another question about champions helping to deal with problems with vendors. Not that we've ever experienced that, but the role of a champion is you keep your ear to the ground. If your antenna wiggles, things feel like they're not going well, or you're having check-ins with your team and you're hearing some rah, rah, rah. How do you bring constructive feedback to vendors? How do you help reset the project or get it back on track?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think we've done some learning on that, with some past vendors and things of that nature. So I like to get the vendors sort of, what their best practices are up front. Do they respond to emails within 24 to 48 hours? What do they want from us? And really those just main, again, best practices from them, because if they don't have those or they can't outline those, it might not be the best fit for us from, past experiences that we've had. And I think you just have to be willing to have very direct conversations, but in a way that doesn't feel, necessarily offensive to someone. Again, to your point, constructive conversations. When you're investing a lot of money and time into some of these projects, you have to make sure that the foundation that's putting that investment forward is getting, what they've paid for and in their investment. So I've had to have some very direct conversations with vendors. We've had to part ways with some vendors that weren't, working out for us because of maybe our timelines or, how fast we were moving. So I think, those project plans I love can also be used for vendors, and setting expectations up front is really key. Asking all the right questions on the high level, like what do you do if your project manager internally is meeting our expectations? Can we get a new project manager? Things like that.
So being willing to have those hard conversations, I think that's where I don't have one of those bosses anymore, but I remember back in the day doing projects and feeling like I needed to bring somebody in with me to help solve knotty problems that just weren't going away, and it was great to feel like somebody had my back, back in.
Yeah, and I like playing that role for my team because a lot of times they're in it day to day with some of these vendors, and you don't want to put them in a situation where they're having to have a tough conversation with a vendor that they work with on a daily basis. So being able to elevate that and having somebody else have the conversation can sometimes be a good thing.
Yeah, it's like good cop, bad cop. just a little bit. You're not always the bad cop, but when we need one, we know we can count on you to kind of have the team's backs. Going back to user adoption and the attention and care that you put into the planning of, really, who's going to update the documentation? How are we going to train people? How are we going to support folks in this business process change? Can you share any examples of how you approach training on new things or for new staff to learn a system that's already been in place? Got any tips?
I do have a tip because it was somewhere we were living a couple years ago where I said, man, I just need to know how to do X. And there's an hour-long video of A to Z. And I have to watch this whole hour-long video to get to X. And it's a 5-second, thing I need to remember how to do. So what I have done with teams is we took some of those topics from these 1 hour, last year we did 4 1-hour videos on updates of just the CRM database. And within that 4 hours, there might be 3 or 4 topics. What we've done over the last year is take all of those topics and broken them down into 5 or 10-minute training videos, which can really, based on that one topic, which can really be helpful for the team. Our field team is extraordinarily busy and they are constantly taking on new things. And if they just need to know how to, find a constituent in Razor's Edge, they should never watch a 1 hour long video to find that information at minute 33 in. A 5-minute video, know how to do it and get it done. So we did a lot of work on that over the past year and now have like a pretty good suite of training videos that are very targeted in our HR system that people can watch. And then I think it's just the refreshing too. You can go to a training and like, oh, great. And then, 6 months, it's like, oh, wait, I don't remember what that was because I haven't done it in 6 months or whatever. So, typically around once a year, we're doing either office hours or updated trainings just to keep it all fresh of mind.
I love that because, no one has the mental bandwidth anymore to sit through an hour of anything. Like even this, it's like 25, 30 minutes. It feels long.
Yeah.
Even though you and I could talk forever about all of this stuff, it's a lot of time. People are multitasking. They're kind of watching with like half an eye. And when you need to know how to do a thing, I haven't done it in 6 months. You changed how we did it. And I sort of paid attention to the initial refresh
Yeah.
training. I got tasks backing up behind me. And so for me to be able to say, let me watch this 5 minute screen share. Oh, now I remember I click that button and then I do that and that. It's a much better fit for how people learn and
Yeah,
how adults' attention spans have changed
for
over
sure.
the past 10 years, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's great too for like that team that has to do the training because now they have a video that they can direct people to when they get that question. So it's helpful. You know, it was a lot of work going into it and having to record all of those different videos, but the payoff is paying off in dividends. So it's great.
Yeah, and you just touched on something that's critical. That's like when you make those 5 minute just in time snapshots,
Yeah,
point people to those links. Don't answer their questions in email if you're the expert that's coming
absolutely.
to you for help. Use those resources, reinforce it. You know,
Yes.
that's how
One
I
of
do it.
the things I did in my very first like national role position for the development team was create a field resource guide. Because there's so many things out there, and it's like, oh, I can't remember which folder this is in on the shared drive, or I can't remember where all of these trainings are in the HR system. You know, everything lives in so many different places. So this is like it's, I don't know, it's gotten longer over the years, but it's like that go-to guide if you just need to know where the trainings are, you just need to remember where the manual is or a certain procedure. So that was something that I think was really helpful in my very first task of me being in a national role. But it's
And
helpful.
set the
And then I
stage.
can tell people too when they ask me, I'm like, well, it's on the field resource guide, so go
Yep.
find it. You know.
Yes, exactly. And this is where I think having a project champion hat based on good operational best practices, that's where both of these things come together. And your field staff feel like you're paying attention and helping things be easier for them. Like
Yes.
it's just like that's what we're supposed to do is take care of barriers, you know, that are in
Yeah.
our team's way.
I've
We've
been
all
there, so I get it.
I think that's what makes you so effective is like what would I need? You know, what would be helpful for me? I don't think we ask ourselves that as often as we should. So as we get ready to wrap this up, any other pointers, tips, advice? I know in a busy time, and so people are in some cases not thinking at all about what's going to happen next year because we just want to get through the next 4 weeks. But budgets are being set or turning over new
Yeah.
fiscal years, new calendar years. Any tips for folks who either are the unnamed project champion or are really responsible for helping make decisions about priorities and executing them?
So we formed two governance groups here at the organization. Maureen, you've been helping and been instrumental with one of them, which is our technology governance group. And
Yeah.
then I was also fortunate enough to be able to create an operations governance group. I kind of asked for permission and it was granted. And that group has been really great because we've been able to really talk about where there might be some gaps at the organization, but we're a solution-based group. So we talk about the gap, then we go and fix it. So we figure out
You
how
don't
to.
just talk about the gap and then put it in the notes and talk about it again 3 months
No, I
later.
don't think
No.
that would be very efficient. So I'm all about efficient meetings, and so that was really a great group that I was able to pull together with some really, really wonderful team members here at the organization from all sorts of departments, all sorts of levels. And it's really helpful to see like the perspective from the coordinators and the managers and the new staff and the staff that's been here for 15 years. And through that operations governance group, we've created like a new travel policy. We've created a relationship guide for managing relationships, which is another key thing we could probably spend,
Oh
another
yeah.
3 talking about. But being that cohesive organization, like if I'm already giving Joe Smith a proposal for a major gift, I don't want my counterpart going and asking them if they want to join a moving day committee or something like a
Right.
committee or something along those lines. So that relationship guide was really helpful. We've created a workflow document talking about these things that trickle down, work that goes cross departmentally. How do you really roll that out so that it's a thoughtful process, so that you don't get to the end of a project and you're like, oh gosh, now we have nobody to do this work. So that's just a few of the things we've done, but it's been a really great group. And then our technology group, similarly, it's really helpful. There's so many moving pieces. We have communications involved, we have IT involved, and really making sure that everybody is on the same page on these high level things that need to be addressed, or even just informed. It's a lot of informing as well.
We spend a lot of time on updates at that tech governance meeting because there's always stuff going on, and it's hard to make. You can send an email out, but forget it. People aren't going to write back or ask their questions. So 20 minutes, 15 minutes, everybody has a couple to share a top line item. And we do all this remotely. So if you're in an organization that's spread across the country, like the Parkinson's Foundation is, or you've got some kind of hybrid work plan going on, we do all of this at a distance through Zoom, and people show up prepared. They're excited for these meetings. They have an opportunity to be really collaborative. And I think that's what all of us want is, can't we all just work together and make a thing happen and not feel like nobody told me, 6 months later, I've got opinions about this. Sarah,
you said the key goal was to break down the silos, right?
Like that. Down the silos. Maybe that is going to be the theme for 2024 is some silo busting. Sarah, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. Please check out the Parkinson's Foundation if you are inclined. I put the website in our chat here. And so I will be doing these over the next couple of weeks as we get through the rest of December, and then we'll set a new schedule. I might switch from Fridays to a different day during the week. I'm going to figure all that stuff out, but you can expect to see me pop on a lot more frequently than you have. I hope you all have a wonderful week, a great fundraising early start to end of year, depending on when you started it. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Can't thank you enough.
No, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
We'll see y'all soon. Talk to you later. Bye, folks.
Bye.